The moment the shuttle's hull cracked against the void, I thought I was dead. My vision blurred as the stars stretched into molten streaks, and somewhere deep inside, I swore the universe itself was laughing at me. But I survived. Somehow, against every protocol and probability, I survived. And that was only the beginning. The Emperor had sent her. Not as a gift, not as a weapon, but as a joke. Lila Vance, the smallest, weakest human in the Earth delegation, was the one they expected to fail spectacularly. They had sent her to the Galactic Summit, where empires weighed power with casual cruelty. They had sent her because she was expendable. And yet, he treated her like gold. I remember the first time I saw her in the Emperor's throne room. She floated into the chamber, her human frame trembling under the weight of alien opulence. Towering crystal spires cast fractured light across the floor, and the Emperor himself regarded her with a gaze that could crush mountains. "She'll die before she speaks," one of my colleagues whispered. But Lila didn't quiver. Not when the Emperor leaned forward, his 8 limbs glinting with polished obsidian armor. Not when his voice, deep as a dying star, filled the chamber. "Human," he said, "you amuse me." That was when I realized it wasn't disdain. It was fascination. The Emperor, the ruler of half a dozen star systems, found her amusing. And for reasons none of us could understand, he offered her a seat on his right, a position reserved for those he revered. What I saw next changed everything. First, Lila said nothing. She studied the Emperor as if he were a puzzle she could dismantle piece by piece. I watched her hands clench at her sides, a subtle rhythm of courage that made my chest ache. The aliens around us laughed, all teeth and scales and blinking lights, convinced she would crumble under their scrutiny. But she didn't. She smiled. Just once. And the laughter stopped. The first microhook came when she spoke. "I know why you sent me," she said softly. Her voice barely carried across the chamber, but it cut through the tension like a laser. "You thought this was a joke, that I was nothing. But I am here. I am listening. And I will be heard." The Emperor tilted his head. Something in that moment shifted. An imperceptible tick. A twitch that suggested curiosity. Not fear, not anger, curiosity. By the time the summit began, Lila had become a lightning rod. Every alien delegate, every human diplomat watched her. And slowly, she learned their rules. Not the rules they preached, but the ones written in subtle gestures, in pauses, in the slight tension in a tentacle or the quiver of a sensory. She played their game, bending it around her small human frame like water around stones. And she won. But victory had a price. The second microhook arrived during the first council session. Lila had been tasked with negotiating a truce between 2 warring civilizations. Simple, they said. Child's play. She emerged 3 hours later with the alien delegates' claws interlocked, their energy shields lowered in deference. "How?" someone whispered. She didn't answer. Not then. Not ever. She only smiled, exhausted, and whispered to herself. They didn't expect humans to understand fear or hope. Then came the escalation. The Emperor, fascinated and increasingly indulgent, invited her to tour his private chambers aboard the flagship Oblivion's Crown. The corridors stretched endlessly, a labyrinth of light and shadow. Technology pulsed beneath transparent floors, the lifeblood of star systems flowing like veins in glass. Here she saw what humans were never meant to see: experiments on matter, lifeforms suspended in quantum cages, and weapons that could undo entire planets. And yet, Lila's attention was drawn not to power, but to the people. The workers, the caretakers, the forgotten ones tucked in corners of the Empire's spine. She spoke to them quietly, asking questions, listening more than she spoke, offering small gestures that slowly reminded the Emperor himself that he wasn't omnipotent, that compassion could exist even here. But that was only the beginning. The first major twist came when the Emperor revealed the true reason she was sent. Not as a joke, not as a trial, but as bait. "You are a symbol," he said, eyes narrowing. "A test. If you survive, humanity proves itself worthy of the Galactic Accord. If not, well, your extinction would have been poetic." The room went silent. Every diplomat, every alien emissary stared at her. She had been a pawn, a fragile token in a cosmic game, and yet she smiled. "Then I will not fail," she said. Her words rippled through the summit, challenging centuries of alien logic. The Emperor, intrigued, began testing her with increasingly impossible tasks. Negotiations that spanned light years in theory, puzzles of ethics that could fracture entire alliances, and confrontations with beings whose mere gaze could induce madness. And every time she adapted, every time she survived, the second microhook arrived when she encountered the Xyler, a species whose communication was entirely psychic, whose emotions could burn minds like plasma. The Xyler declared she was insignificant, a term in their language that equated to being a disease. Most humans would have collapsed, swallowed by the weight of alien judgment. Lila did not. She stepped into the psychic storm, her own mind a fragile shield, and met their wave with clarity and humanity. "I understand fear," she told them, voice steady in her thoughts. "But I also understand courage." The psychic backlash should have ended her. It did not. Instead, the Xyler bowed, an ancient form of respect that none of us thought possible. What I saw next changed everything. By the halfway mark of the summit, the galactic accord itself was at stake. The Emperor, having observed Lila for weeks, proposed an unprecedented challenge. She must arbitrate a dispute that could trigger a war across 3 systems. Failure meant death not only for her, but for Earth and its colonies. And she accepted. The chambers where the debate occurred were vast, walls shimmering with the colors of nebulae. The air vibrated with energy and anticipation. Lila's human frame seemed impossibly small against the grandeur, yet she carried herself as though she were a queen. She spoke with a voice that combined fearlessness and empathy, logic and intuition, weaving alliances from threads no one else could see. But the real turning point, the one nobody expected, came when she confronted the Emperor directly. "Why me?" she demanded, her eyes locked with his 8-limbed gaze. "Why treat me as anything but a joke?" For the first time he looked uncertain. His usual confidence faltered. "Because," he said slowly, "no one else could have done what you did. No one else could have reminded me that even an emperor is not above humanity." The third microhook struck when he extended a hand. Not in command, not in demand, but in acknowledgement. A gesture that could have been interpreted as a truce, an alliance, or something profoundly personal. Lila hesitated, then placed her own hand against his. It was a touch that shifted the balance of power. A simple act that reminded every being in the room that influence did not always come from strength, size, or firepower. Sometimes it came from courage, from choice, from heart. The final act approached with tension so thick it could be sliced. The enemies of the summit, creatures who had waited for humanity's destruction, launched a last-minute strike. Energy storms tore through the flagship, alarms screamed across corridors, and entire decks were ripped into the void. The Emperor's elite guards faltered for the first time in centuries. And Lila ran, not away but toward the chaos. Her human instincts, sharp, agile, unpredictable, allowed her to navigate the wreckage, coordinate evacuation, and rally the humans and aliens alike. She became a bridge between species, her humanity the lever that prevented annihilation. None of us were prepared for the truth. After the storm, when the corridors were littered with debris and the air still crackled with residual energy, the Emperor turned to her. Exhausted, battered, but unbroken, she stood before him. "You saved more than a planet," he said, his voice quiet now, almost reverent. "You saved the Accord, and perhaps even me." Lila looked at him, her chest heaving, sweat and grime streaking her face. "Then maybe humanity isn't so insignificant after all." The last microhook arrived as she stepped down from the throne room, leaving the Emperor's private chambers. The galaxy watched, uncertain whether to cheer or bow. She turned once, her eyes meeting mine, and whispered, "This is only the beginning." By the time she returned to Earth, Lila was more than a diplomat. She was a symbol, a legend whispered across star systems. The Emperor, the most powerful being any human had ever encountered, had treated her like gold, not because of her strength or her intellect or even her courage alone, but because she embodied something aliens could not fabricate, humanity in its purest, most defiant form. And we learned something that no negotiation, no treaty, no weapon could ever teach us. Courage does not scale with size. Influence does not depend on might. And sometimes the smallest among us can reshape the universe. The final revelation came quietly, in the aftermath of galactic applause and diplomatic reports. Lila had been sent as a joke, yes, But she had returned as proof. Proof that humanity, for all its flaws, could stand among the stars, not merely surviving but reshaping destinies. And as I watched her walk through the halls of the Earth Council, head held high, I understood that some jokes carry a weight the universe cannot ignore. The Emperor never explained why he favored her, why he treated her like gold. Perhaps he never could. Perhaps it was enough that she survived. Perhaps it was enough that she reminded the galaxy that even in the shadow of gods, a human could shine. She paused at the observation deck, looking out at the stars stretching across the void. The light of distant worlds reflected in her eyes. And I realized that the story would be told for generations, not because of the Emperor, not because of the technology, not because of the summit itself, but because of one human girl who refused to be a joke. One human girl who changed everything. The last line lingered like a star suspended in the void. Somewhere in the cosmos, a joke became a legacy, and the universe would never forget her name.